Man, don't drink that. The young restaurant employee barely moved his lips as he reached across our table for an empty plate. For a second, I thought I'd misunderstood him. Around me, my family was still laughing. My daughter was taking pictures of the anniversary cake. My sister was arguing playfully with my son about who had embarrassed themselves most during their childhood. And across the private dining room, my husband Daniel was smiling like the proudest man alive. "What did you say?" I whispered. The employee kept his eyes on the plate. "I saw your husband put something in your glass." My fingers went cold. Before I could ask another question, he straightened and walked away. I stared at the sparkling water in front of me. Less than 2 minutes earlier, Daniel had raised his glass and told everyone, 23 years ago, Naomi gave me the greatest gift anyone could give another person, her trust. Everyone had applauded. I had nearly cried. Now a stranger was telling me that the same man had secretly put something into my drink. I looked across the room. Daniel stood beside our daughter, laughing at something she was showing him on her phone. This was my husband, the father of my children, the man whose career I had supported while we were raising a family, the man who handled our investments, insurance, accounts, and almost every major financial decision because I trusted him to protect what we had built together. 23 years. How could I believe a stranger over him? Then Daniel looked at me, not at my face, at my glass. He returned to his chair and smiled. "You haven't even tried it." There was nothing threatening about the words. That was what frightened me. I forced a smile. "I was waiting for you." Daniel's eyes stayed on the glass for 1 second too long. My daughter leaned forward. "Mom, tell Aunt Rachel what Dad did on your first anniversary." Everyone laughed. Daniel turned toward his brother-in-law, and I made my decision. His glass and mine were identical. Keeping my hands low beneath the edge of the table, I quietly switched them. When Daniel looked back, I lifted the glass that had originally belonged to him. "To 23 years," I said. His shoulders seemed to relax. "To 23 more." He picked up the glass that had been mine and drank. I watched him swallow. For the first minute, nothing happened. By the fourth, I started questioning myself. Maybe the employee had been mistaken. Maybe Daniel had dropped sweetener into my drink. Maybe there was some ridiculous explanation and I had just secretly switched glasses with my husband on our anniversary because of something whispered by a stranger. 8 minutes passed. Daniel was still talking. I almost felt ashamed. Then his fork slipped from his fingers. It struck the plate with a sharp metallic sound. Our daughter stopped speaking. "Dad?" Daniel blinked slowly. "I'm fine." But the words dragged strangely. He reached for the edge of the table. "Daniel," I said. He tried to stand. His chair scraped backward and his knees buckled. My son jumped up. "Dad." Everything erupted at once. My sister shouted for someone to call for help. A server rushed through the doors. My daughter grabbed Daniel's arm while my son tried to keep him upright. I remained frozen beside my chair, not because Daniel was suddenly struggling to stay conscious, because of where he was looking. Daniel wasn't staring at our frightened children. He wasn't looking toward the restaurant staff rushing to help him. He was staring directly at the glass in front of me. His glass, the one I had switched, and beneath the confusion clouding his face, I saw something unmistakable. Recognition. He knew why this was happening, which meant the stranger had been telling the truth. Daniel had expected me to drink from that glass. As my family crowded around the man I had trusted for 23 years, one question drowned out every voice in that restaurant. What had my husband expected to happen to me tonight? Restaurant staff moved Daniel away from the table while someone called for emergency help. My son stayed beside him. My daughter kept asking, "Dad, can you hear me?" I stood several feet away with my hands locked together so tightly my nails pressed into my palms. A server reached toward my place setting. "Please don't touch anything," I said. He stopped. My sister looked at me. "Naomi, nothing. Just leave everything exactly where it is." She stared at me as if she wanted an explanation, but I couldn't give one yet. Not until I understood what Daniel had done. He was still conscious, but barely. His speech had become slow and unfocused. One moment he was insisting he felt fine, the next he was struggling to keep his eyes open. My daughter turned toward me. "Mom, why do you look like that?" I glanced at Daniel. "Because I need to talk to your father." She shook her head. "He needs a doctor." "I know." Restaurant staff cleared a path as emergency responders arrived. For a few seconds, while my children stepped aside to answer questions, I moved closer to Daniel. I leaned down. What did you put in my drink? His eyes opened, and for one brief second, the confusion disappeared. Fear replaced it. What? You heard me. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone saw you. Daniel stared at me, then he asked, who? Not what, not when. Who? I straightened slowly. That single word told me more than any confession could have. He realized it too. Naomi. Wait, but I stepped away. As the responders continued examining him, pieces of the last few months started moving through my mind, not randomly, in order. Daniel standing in the kitchen one morning and asking, have you been forgetting things lately? I had laughed, no more than you. 2 weeks later, in front of our son, he corrected me about the date of a family dinner. I had been right. Daniel insisted I wasn't. Then there were the bank statements. I'll handle them, he had said. You hate paperwork? I don't hate paperwork. He smiled. You always get stressed by numbers. At the time, I let it go. Then came the conversation about power of attorney. We're getting older, Daniel had said. We should update everything just in case. I remember joking, you're 50, not 90. He hadn't laughed. A week later, he booked an appointment with our family doctor and told me it was just a routine checkup. During the appointment, the doctor asked whether I had noticed changes in my memory. I remember looking at Daniel. He smiled reassuringly. I just want us to be careful. I had thought it was love. Standing inside that restaurant while he was being taken for medical evaluation, I suddenly wondered whether it had been preparation. My sister approached. Naomi, what is going on? I looked toward the young employee who had warned me. I need the manager. Within minutes, the restaurant manager led me into a small office near the private dining room. The employee came with us. He looked nervous. I faced him. Tell me exactly what you saw. He swallowed. You were standing near the cake taking pictures. I remembered. My daughter had pulled me away from the table. The employee continued. Your husband reached into his jacket. He took out something small. I couldn't see exactly what it was, but I saw him put something into your drink. You're sure it was mine? Yes, ma'am. The manager leaned forward. Which glass? I pointed toward the dining room, the one Daniel drank from. The manager frowned. He drank from it? I switched them. Both men went silent. I want those glasses preserved, I said, and nothing from that table cleared. The manager nodded immediately. We'll secure the table and preserve the camera footage. You have cameras inside the private dining area? Coverage at the entrances and parts of the room, the employee added. I was near the service station when I saw him. For the first time that night, I felt my position shift. I was no longer relying only on a whispered warning. There was a witness, possibly footage, and 2 glasses that had not yet been touched. The manager excused himself to speak with staff. I returned to the dining room. The anniversary cake was still sitting untouched. 23 silver candles decorated the top. Our family photographs were scattered across the table. Daniel's jacket was draped across the back of his chair. His phone sat beside his plate. I stared at it. The screen suddenly lit up. I did not touch it. A calendar notification appeared. Monday, 10 a.m. Then the full title became visible. Naomi Competency Paperwork / Final Signatures. My breath caught. I pulled out my own phone. Before Daniel's screen went dark, I photographed the notification. Then I stood there staring at the picture. Competency, Final Signatures. 3 days away, Daniel had been telling people I was forgetting things. He had pushed me toward new legal paperwork. And tonight, at our 23rd anniversary dinner, he had secretly put something into my drink. This was no longer one terrible moment. It had started long before we entered that restaurant. By the time Daniel returned from medical evaluation later that evening, our anniversary dinner had turned into something none of us could pretend was normal. The cake was untouched. The glasses had been secured. The restaurant had preserved the table and relevant security footage, and authorities had been contacted because of the suspected drink tampering. Daniel walked back into the private dining area looking exhausted, but alert enough to understand exactly what was happening. His eyes found me first. Then he noticed our children, the restaurant manager, the responding authorities, and his expression changed. What is all this? One of the officers spoke calmly. Sir, we need to clarify what happened tonight. Daniel looked at me. Naomi, I folded my arms. Answer their questions. His jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. I had a medical episode. Our daughter stepped forward. They said you had an unexpected sedating substance in your system. Daniel hesitated. Then somebody made a mistake. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, who? He stared at me. It was the same question he had asked earlier, except this time everyone heard the silence that followed. Daniel looked around the room and seemed to realize he needed another explanation. Then he did something I never expected. He pointed the suspicion at me. Naomi has been confused lately. My daughter frowned. What? Daniel continued quickly. She's been forgetting things, becoming suspicious, misunderstanding conversations. This whole situation could be… Stop. Our daughter's voice cut through the room. Daniel looked at her. She pointed toward him. What does mum being confused have to do with something being in your drink? Nobody spoke. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. I watched him searching for somewhere else to take the conversation. For months, he had been able to define reality before I questioned it. Tonight, that power was disappearing in front of our family. I took out my phone. There's something else. Daniel's eyes dropped toward the screen. I opened the photograph I had taken. Your phone received a calendar notification while you were gone. His face tightened. I read it aloud. Monday. Naomi competency paperwork. Final signatures. Our son suddenly looked at Daniel. Competency? Daniel answered immediately. Estate planning. Then why does it have Mum's name? Because it concerns both of us. Our son shook his head slowly. No. Daniel turned toward him. What do you mean no? You used that word with me. Daniel went still. I looked at my son. When? A few weeks ago. He rubbed his forehead. Dad asked if I'd noticed you declining. My stomach tightened. Declining how? Your memory, decision-making. He asked whether you'd been repeating yourself or forgetting conversations. I turned toward my daughter. She had gone pale. Dad asked me too. Daniel stepped toward her. That was private, she recoiled. You told me Mum might be getting worse. Our son stared at his sister. He told you that? Yes. Daniel raised both hands. I was worried about your mother. No, I said quietly. Tell them the examples. Daniel glared at me. I looked at my children. What did he say I had forgotten? My son answered first. The dinner at Rachel's house. I pulled up my messages. Rachel changed that dinner from Saturday to Sunday. She texted all of us. I showed him. His face fell. My daughter spoke next. He said you misplaced some insurance papers. Your father moved them into his office. I asked him for them twice. Daniel interrupted. This proves nothing. I looked directly at him. It proves you were telling our children things about me without telling me. I was protecting you. From what? He had no answer. I finally understood why our children had occasionally watched me strangely during conversations. Daniel had been speaking to them separately, giving each of them different examples, making each believe they were quietly witnessing their mother deteriorate. My sister moved beside me. You're not going home with him tonight. Daniel snapped. Stay out of my marriage. No, I said. He turned toward me. I'm not going home with you. Naomi, don't make decisions while you're upset. There it was again, the same gentle, controlling tone. Except now everyone heard it differently. I stepped closer. And I will not sign anything Monday. His face changed. No financial documents, no medical documents, no estate paperwork, no power of attorney. Nothing you prepared. You don't understand what those papers are? Then my attorney can explain them to me. Attorney? Yes. His voice rose. You're going to destroy 23 years of marriage because of one misunderstanding? I pointed toward the preserved anniversary table, then explained the misunderstanding. Daniel said nothing. Explain why you had something with you tonight that ended up in the glass meant for me. Silence. Explain why you were telling our children I was losing my memory. Still nothing? Explain why I'm supposed to sign competency paperwork Monday. Daniel looked toward our children, perhaps expecting one of them to step in. Neither moved. For the first time that night, he stood completely alone. Then my son slowly stepped forward. His expression had changed from confusion to something harder. He looked directly at his father. Dad, you told me tonight was supposed to prove Mum needed help. I turned toward my son so quickly my chair brushed against the table. What did you just say? He looked at Daniel, then back at me. Earlier this week, Dad called me. Daniel immediately interrupted. You misunderstood that conversation. No, I didn't. My son's voice was firmer now. He told me something might happen tonight. My daughter stepped closer. What kind of something? He said Mom might get confused, maybe say things that didn't make sense or have trouble staying focused. I stared at Daniel. You predicted that. Daniel shook his head. I said it was possible. My son continued before he could redirect the conversation. You told me not to panic if it happened because Mom had been hiding episodes from us. I was concerned about her. You told me tonight would make things clearer. That sentence changed the entire anniversary dinner for me. I looked around the private room, the elegant table, our children, my sister, close relatives, the anniversary photographs. Daniel had chosen a room full of witnesses. My daughter suddenly covered her mouth. He told me to watch Mom. Everyone looked at her. She lowered her hand. Before dinner, Dad said I should pay attention to how Mom behaved tonight because sometimes people can hide problems when they know they're being watched. I looked at Daniel. He had prepared both of them. Months of comments about my memory had created the suspicion. Tonight was supposed to confirm it. The fancy restaurant wasn't merely where Daniel had chosen to celebrate our 23rd anniversary. It was where he expected me to become visibly impaired in front of everyone whose opinion mattered. But one question remained: why? Why would my husband need our children to believe I could no longer make decisions for myself? The following morning, I sat across from an attorney with my sister beside me. I placed my phone on the desk. This is the notification from Daniel's phone. She studied the photograph, competency paperwork, final signatures. I haven't agreed to anything involving competency. Then don't sign anything until we understand exactly what was prepared. I won't. For 23 years, Daniel had handled most of our financial paperwork. That ended in that office. I want everything reviewed, I said. Joint accounts, investments, insurance, property documents, his business, anything carrying my name or signature? The attorney nodded. We'll start by establishing what you legally have access to and identifying anything unusual. I also changed access to accounts that were legally mine alone. Then I gave her every detail about the restaurant investigation, the warning, the switched glasses, the preserved evidence, the employee who had seen Daniel near my drink. Later, we received another critical piece. The restaurant confirmed that security footage showed Daniel handling my glass while I was away from the table taking the anniversary photographs. The employer agreed to provide a formal statement about what he had witnessed. Daniel could still deny his intentions, but he could no longer pretend nothing had happened. Then the financial records started arriving. The first irregularity looked small, the second didn't. By the time my attorney placed several statements side by side, my stomach had tightened. Do you recognize these transfers? I leaned forward. No. Large amounts of money had moved through accounts connected to Daniel's private business. Money I believed was still part of our reserves had been redirected. Some documents contained signatures attributed to me that I did not remember authorizing. I pointed toward one. I never signed this. We'll have it examined, my attorney said. She turned another page. Daniel's business had been struggling far more seriously than he had ever told me. Money had been moving toward it while our supposedly protected reserve shrank. Then she placed a draft document in front of me. What is this? It appears to have been prepared as part of a broader financial authority arrangement. I read the language twice. If I were deemed unable to manage certain decisions independently, Daniel could gain significantly broader authority over our finances. Suddenly, every strange moment connected. The questions about my memory, the doctor appointment, the conversations with our children, the competency paperwork, the anniversary dinner. Daniel wasn't simply trying to embarrass me. He needed people to stop trusting my judgment before I discovered what he had done. If I questioned the missing money while everyone believed I was mentally declining, Daniel could dismiss my accusations as confusion. And if he gained broader authority before I uncovered the financial damage, he could keep control of what remained. I looked at my attorney. He needed me to look incapable. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. My phone rang. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. I answered. Sweetheart? Her breathing was uneven. Mom, what happened? Dad called me. My attorney looked up. I put the phone on speaker. What did he say? There was a brief silence. Then my daughter blurted out the words that finally pushed the truth to the surface. Mom, Dad just admitted why he needed you to look sick. Tell me exactly what he said. My daughter went quiet for a moment. Then she answered, Dad said he was trying to keep everything from falling apart. I looked across the desk at my attorney. What does that mean? He said the business was in trouble, really bad trouble. He said you were starting to ask questions about money, and if he found out before he fixed things, everything would be over. My attorney pulled the financial statements closer. I asked, did he explain the dinner? Yes, my daughter's voice cracked. He said he needed us to understand that you weren't handling things properly anymore. There it was, not every detail yet, but enough to connect what we already had. Over the next several days, the full picture emerged from Daniel's statements, the conversations he'd had with our children, the financial records, the competency-related paperwork, the restaurant footage, the employee's account, and the evidence preserved from our anniversary table. Daniel's business had been losing money for months. Instead of telling me, he tried to rescue it himself. He moved marital funds toward the business while continuing to tell me everything was fine. When I started asking why certain statements were missing and why some balances looked different from what I remembered, Daniel panicked. He couldn't admit the truth, so he began attacking the one thing that could protect his secret, my credibility. The little comments about my memory hadn't been innocent. Neither had the corrections in front of our children, the doctor's appointment, the insistence that finances were becoming too stressful for me, the suggestion that we update our powers of attorney. And Daniel had approached our children separately because he didn't want them comparing stories. He wanted each of them to believe they had independently noticed something wrong with me. Then came our 23rd anniversary, the restaurant, the family gathering, the perfect collection of witnesses, the glass. Daniel had expected me to drink from it and become visibly impaired. If I became confused, heavily drowsy, and unable to behave normally, our family would see exactly what Daniel had spent months preparing them to see. Not a woman affected by something secretly placed in her drink, a woman supposedly losing the ability to manage her own life. Then in the days after the anniversary, Daniel intended to use that fear to pressure me into signing the paperwork that would give him greater financial control. He hadn't planned for me to die. He needed something more useful to his scheme. He needed me alive, frightened, embarrassed, and doubting myself. He needed our children to say, Mom, maybe Dad is right. And he needed that to happen before I discovered where our money had gone. There was only one thing Daniel had never planned for: a restaurant employee paying attention and me switching the glasses. A few days later, I agreed to meet Daniel with our children present. I brought copies of the financial records. Daniel sat across from me, looking like a man who hadn't slept properly since our anniversary. I placed the documents between us. He stared at them. You went through everything? No, I said. Professionals did. His jaw tightened. I was going to replace the money. That isn't what I asked. I thought I could save the business. And when you couldn't, Daniel looked away. I needed time. You needed control. I was desperate, Naomi. I leaned forward. When did protecting your secret become more important than protecting me? He had no immediate answer. Our daughter sat beside me, wiping tears from her cheeks. Daniel finally said, I never wanted to hurt you. She looked at him. You put something in Mom's drink. I wasn't trying to stop. Her voice shook. You told me she was forgetting things. You made me watch her. Daniel lowered his head. Our son spoke next. You did the same thing to me. I was trying to prepare both of you. For a lie, I said. Daniel looked at me. I made terrible decisions. Yes, but 23 years has to mean something. It does. He seemed almost relieved. Then I continued. It means you had 23 years to tell me when something went wrong. His face fell. If you told me the business was failing, we could have dealt with it. If you told me you made a financial mistake, I would have been furious, but we could have faced it. I tapped the documents. But you decided destroying my credibility was easier than telling me the truth. Our son rubbed his eyes. I should have asked you about what Dad was saying. I shook my head. No. He looked at me. You are both manipulated. Your father created the lie. He gave each of you pieces of it and made sure you didn't know the other had heard the same thing. My daughter reached for my hand. For once, Daniel had nothing to say. That meeting was the end of our marriage in every way that mattered. I separated from him and began divorce proceedings. Through my attorney, I worked to protect the assets legally belonging to me and separate myself from Daniel's business liabilities wherever possible. The suspected drink tampering remained under official investigation, supported by the restaurant evidence and the employee's statement. Financial professionals separately reviewed the questionable transactions and documents connected to Daniel. The man who had controlled our finances for most of our marriage no longer had automatic access to mine. Our children pulled away from him while they tried to process what he had done. Relatives eventually learned why our anniversary dinner had ended with emergency assistance, preserved glasses, and authorities instead of cake. I didn't launch a campaign against Daniel. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke more clearly than anger ever could. For months, Daniel had tried to portray me as a woman incapable of managing her own affairs. Instead, I became the person organizing records, meeting attorneys, reviewing statements, questioning documents, and making decisions for myself. Daniel became the one answering questions from lawyers, from financial professionals, from investigators, and worst of all for him, from his own children. Months later, I was living separately. I had professional guidance with my finances and direct access to every account connected to me. No more asking Daniel for statements. No more accepting "I'll handle it." No more signing anything I hadn't personally read and understood. My relationship with my children changed too. We made one agreement. If one of us was worried about another, we would speak directly to that person. Nobody would ever again be allowed to build suspicion between us through private whispers. There was one more person I couldn't forget, the restaurant employee. I wrote him a thank you note. I didn't know what would have happened if he decided it wasn't his business. I only knew what happened because he spoke. I kept one photograph from our 23rd anniversary dinner. It was taken minutes before everything began. Sometimes I still look at it. Everyone is smiling. My daughter is leaning toward me. My son is laughing. The anniversary cake is waiting in the background. Daniel has his arm around my shoulder. If you saw that photograph without knowing what happened afterward, you'd probably think you were looking at a happy family celebrating 23 successful years of marriage. That's why I kept it. Not because I missed that marriage, because it reminds me that appearances can survive long after the truth underneath them has changed. I had trusted Daniel because 23 years of marriage gave me every reason to believe I could. Trusting someone didn't make me incompetent. It made what he did a betrayal. Daniel planned for one glass to convince everyone Naomi could no longer control her own life, but 12 minutes after she switched those glasses, he lost control of his.